So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to my panel. So maybe we'll start with you, Ashley. Would you like to tell our audience a little bit about you?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Ashley. You can call me Ash. I'm a clinical psychologist by training. I work in private practice, so I see mostly adult clients. Had a little bit of experience working in like forensics, but that was a long time ago. That was like before I was getting my psychology registration. So that was, probably more than a decade ago now, when I was doing more case management. That was more to do with people who were charged for crimes and were remanded to, like have their mental status checked to see if, that had any contribution to the alleged crime that they committed. So so I wasn't kind of like directly doing the assessment, but I was involved in some of those assessments that were done. Yeah, but I'm not doing a lot of probably almost close to non-forensic work now, but that's been helpful to have that background. What I do mostly now is seeing clients for therapy. So clients come voluntarily, and my interest areas in trauma and also in neurodivergence. So working with people with autism and ADHD, having different brain types and trauma-informed practice. Like that's really the interest area that has been there for me for quite a long time, which I think informs a lot around, just how people show up, whether they feel safe or not, and depending on the history as well. Yeah, so I think that should be enough about me as a gist, unless there were any more questions.
Yeah, and I guess really important point to note for our audience that the overlap between forensic and clinical psychology is about 70%. So we study pretty much the same stuff. Most forensic psychologists practice as clinicians, or not most, but a lot of them do. And a lot of us clinical psychologists do forensic work. And so even when Ash is saying she doesn't do any forensic work now, I'm sure you do write some reports for your clients sometimes, treating psychologist reports and things. But yeah, like we're not predominantly working in that area now, but you've had some good experience. I mean, that's definitely relevant to the conversation today.
That's true. Yeah, like kind of understanding personality disorders, or how that was being diagnosed, and sort of having to do that differential diagnosis. How much of it is mental health, and how much of it is sort of more long-standing, traits, I guess, that people might possess. Yeah, and kind of trying to differentiate that.
Yeah, for sure. And just a note as well before we get to Mel. So Dr. Westcott, who we're going to talk about a little bit later today, and Dr. Wala, they're two of the psychologists who did evaluate Rick Allen in this case. They're both clinical psychologists. So they have a doctorate of clinical psychology, but they've obviously also practiced in forensics. So that's a lot of us. Most people who have listened to me before know that I've worked in the jail setting, again, also about 10 years ago. Over 10 years ago now, but I was a clinical psychologist as well. So you don't have to be a forensic psychologist to work in the forensic setting. Okay, but let's go to Mel and let's find out a little bit more about Mel.
Thanks, Amy. I'm Mel, and I am a clinical psychologist registrar, and I work in a private practice like Ash and Amy. And I also work, along with working in private practice, I also work at a facility there. I do work with forensic clients who have been referred to us by the forensic facilities. Yeah, my role isn't necessary to do any kind of assessments, but it's mainly to manage and also, I guess, do risk assessments and put safety plans in place. Yeah, that's me. I don't know, Amy, Ashley, do you have any questions?
No, I think that kind of covers us all. So we're all actually pretty experienced clinicians. I've been practicing for 15 years now. Yeah, I mean, that's including internship as well. What about you, Ash? How many years now would you say you've been practicing as a psych?
Yeah, well, as a clin psych, that would be, let me see, after the master's training, that would be probably my 6th year now, I would say. I was working for another 5 years before then, and that was where the forensic experience, among others, came in. So yeah, I guess overall, 10-ish years, but just specifically in psychology, that's about 6 years.
Yeah. Okay. And just when I was advertising what we were going to do today earlier, I already introduced you as one of as the most intelligent person I know. So
Okay, that's a lot of pressure.
but yes, I think all three of us are highly experienced and intelligent women. So I think we're a good panel. Mel, how many years of experience do you have?
So, as a clinical psych registrar, I have been, I would say, about 3 years. But as a registered psychologist, I've worked for about 15 years.
Yeah, that's right. Because I was just going to say, we all work in the same clinic, which is an
Mm,
award-winning clinic. I love saying that. Mel is a senior psychologist there. So
yes.
it's just this thing around our clinical training and registrar programs. It's just something in Australia, the way that they kind of do it is that you can have a lot of experience, but you just have to go through these particular steps to get the formal accreditation. But let's get into the case. So like I was saying, I've told the ladies a little bit about the Delphi case and a bit about Richard Allen, not at all the detail that I myself have and most of the people who probably listen to me have, but that's okay. We actually want them to go in with less of the information because that can bias people as well. So I really wanted this panel as an opportunity to get the views of people who've not been biased by any of the coverage. So yeah, that was kind of the point of this. So I'm going to try and not offer as much of my opinion today because people can hear that anytime on my channel, and rather we're really going to see what Ash and Mel think based on just the introduction to this case and just looking at the testimony and the confessions and the videos and things like that. So I'm going to just try and facilitate the conversation. I probably won't be able to help myself but say certain things, but I'm going to try and take a bit of a backseat because like I said, I can record this. I can record something about my own views anytime, and I've written my long 34-page report that's out circulating as well. Okay, so there's multiple layers when we come to the psychology in this case. We've got so many avenues we could explore, but the main things we're going to do is we're going to try and understand who is Richard Allen, get like a historical background, a mental health history, what was his life like up till October 2022 when he was arrested, what was his life like up until February 2017 when the crime occurred. And then we'll do post-arrest and incarceration where we look at what happens as he does decompensate. So spoiler alert to Mel and Ashley. But yeah, when he decompensates and when he confesses, I think it's 61 times, guys. But again, that's later down the track. We may need to do this in two parts. So as we're recording this, I don't know if we're going to finish this all in one part, but we'll try. Otherwise, we'll schedule a part two. So without further ado, if you guys have any questions, Mel and Ash, about the case as we're going, feel free to ask me. So I'm going to just read out the information that Dr. Polly Westcott, who was the defense psychologist who was used to assess Rick Allen when he was incarcerated, what she obtained through doing extensive file review, watching video surveillance of him while he was incarcerated and interviewing him and having one of her assistants do the neuropsychological testing. So I'm going to give you all of that information, but I'm not going to tell you what her conclusions were in terms of diagnosis. So I'm going to just eliminate those things and you're just going to hear the kind of background information and some of the results of testing. And I want to then pause and get your thoughts. Okay?
Yep.
And so for my listeners, this is, it might be going over old ground if you have already listened to coverage of the trial or read the transcripts, but there's volumes of transcripts, guys. So the chances are they may not have. I know even for me getting through the psych transcripts, it was like hundreds of pages. So Dr. Westcott's role, so she was doing an independent evaluation and neuropsychology. So she was reviewing the mental health history pre-custody and in custody like we're doing now. She conducted neuropsychological testing. She had an assistant that did that, but she interpreted that. And then she offered a 127-page report, which we don't have, but we've heard parts of it during her testimony at trial. She spent about 2 hours with Rick Allen. So this is in August of 2023. So just a bit of background, Mel and Ash. So when Rick did decompensate while he was in custody, so he was arrested in October, late October, and he initially was doing okay in custody. And then around April of 2020, so that's about 6 months into his incarceration, is when he started confessing and showing indicators of psychological decompensation, which we'll go into a bit further later. So by the time Dr. Westcott is assessing him in August, it's after he's decompensated and he's been treated with antipsychotics. So he's somewhat, I don't know if he's back to pre-morbid levels. We'll talk about that later, but he's not floridly psychotic. Okay. So let's get into the summary. So Rick Allen is a man who had an extensive mental health history. So from the time that he was a child, based on her interview with him and talking to his wife, Kathy, and looking at medical records, he remembers things like having intense difficulties with anxiety going to school. He had intense fears that he couldn't control his worrying and that he would go to school and then never come home. He had intense fears that something bad was going to happen to his family when he was separated from them. He had intense anxiety around other people and feared that other people were looking at him and thinking of him badly, even if there wasn't evidence for that. He was always very concerned about what other people thought of him, and so that made him a little bit more closed off. He kept to himself because he had such concerns and worries about what others were thinking. And so this worry about what other people think of him was ongoing into his 50s. So as well, just to let you guys know, so he was arrested at age 50 and the crime occurred in 2017. He would have been age 44 at that time. So into adulthood, he continued to have anxiety and it became really difficult, very prominent. And so he starts medication in his 20s. He starts it at first for anxiety, but then over time, there's pretty severe depression that comes into play. The depression is, and this is in her words, really a reaction to the anxiety. He can't control the anxiety. He can't control how he's feeling around other people. He's constantly thinking that he's failing his family. He's failing other people that he's working with. Again, in reality, he's not, but that's how he's feeling. And then he feels worthless and he feels like he's not able to provide for his family. He's sure that other people don't like him. He often wishes that he would die. He often hurts himself. And so just to give some context, Rick married Kathy quite young. I believe it was early 20s. They have a daughter. So at the time that he's arrested, his daughter's in her 20s and she's moved out of home. He lives in the local area of Delphi and has worked around that local area more recently, but also within the Indiana area for longer. He has steady employment as a pharmacy technician. So what that means is not a pharmacist, but, like the person who is, it's like the customer service role. But he's in a supervisory role. He's previously worked at Walmart. So he's worked a lot in retail and always ended up in sort of supervisory type positions or management positions. History of steady employment. Relationship with wife is reported to be good. She stood by him and does continue to this day. So no indications of any issues with family. Close to his mum. Dad left when he was, I think, an infant, but mum remarried and he refers to his stepdad as dad, and they subsequently had another child. So he has a sister who he grew up with as well, who's a few years younger than him. I'm just going to go back to a little bit more about his mental health. So in his medical records, between his 20s all the way up through to when he was incarcerated, pretty frequently being seen for medication evaluations, reporting symptoms of depression and anxiety. They vary in terms of their levels of control. One of the things that's a factor in terms of his anxiety and depression is that he has a pretty clear-cut history of when there are what she calls external stressors. So things in his life outside of him happen as a stressor. Something happens, puts additional pressure on him, stress on him, and he kind of crumbles and falls apart, quite literally, curling up in a ball, crying. Most of his anxieties in adulthood revolve around two concepts. Work. He feels like he's failing at work, that he's letting other people down at work, that he's not doing his job appropriately, that his own internal experience, this is his own internal experience and belief. When you look at his work history, he's had essentially 3 fairly long jobs, 9 or 10 years apiece, where he's loyal, responsible, he does the job, people like him, they promote him. But when he's promoted, there's more stress on him. He's expected to actually tell other people what to do, which is something that causes him anxiety. He worries that if he tells somebody what to do, they're not going to like him. And then he crashes and the depression comes on. So the companies like him so well that they keep him on, and he ends up working for several years. So the pattern happens 3 times where he stays within the job. They're not letting him go, but every time he kind of rises to the top and he's in a management position, he can't handle the stress of it. And you see it all over the place where he's at home again, kind of crawling, curling up in a ball, crying. So they end up keeping him on, but they'll allow him to demote himself essentially, but they still want him to stay on. His plays a key role in kind of putting him back together and making him feel good about himself and kind of sending him back out on his way. And so, as I said, the work is usually really understanding. They allow him to be demoted, but still keep him at the job. But even in lower positions, he's still having anxiety and depression because seeing himself kind of fall from that position also contributes to feelings of I'm worthless, I'm not doing well, I'm not providing for my family. So a bit of a history there of a trigger for him. In terms of family history of mental illness, they weren't allowed to talk about that at trial. That was considered hearsay, so I can't give you any background of that. A side note, and this is my interpretation, but, I guess Dad leaving the family when he was an infant, sometimes to me that speaks to maybe Dad having some of his own concerns, but it's hard to know. That's my interpretation, guys. Was there ever a time, I'm just reading some of the questions that were asked of her, was there ever a time in Rick's adult life when he was not suffering from depression and anxiety? And she said, I'd say there's always a time where he's suffering at some level. There's a spectrum for anxiety and depression. There's always some level of anxiety and depression. There are periods of time where symptoms have improved. Usually that's when medications have been switched around or there's been a change in his work environment where there's less of a demand or perceived demand for him. There was one point in time because of his job that he lived away from his family, which was also a point in time where he kind of crumbled and wasn't able to maintain his mental health. But once he reunited with his family again, they were a strong support for him. So I'm not going to go into the next part just yet. Let's stop and have some thoughts. What sort of ideas are coming up in your mind about Rick?
Probably just generally, that long-standing anxiety and depression would make me think about this is someone who probably has quite a I guess what we call like a highly sensitive person kind of, neurotype or brain type. Doesn't say what it is, but it's definitely a person who is very much affected by their surroundings and their interactions with others, relationships. And it's hard to say with that little information, but I was thinking from that sort of like trauma frame as well. If someone has had, I guess, attachment disruption, I was referring more to maybe partly father passing away when he was that young, but also how things were like for the rest of the family when that happened. I think
Ashley, father didn't pass away, he left.
Oh, so sorry,
he
left.
Yeah, okay. he abandoned the family essentially. So
yeah,
his stepdad
right.
is. So yeah, you're still on point though with.
Yeah, sure. I guess either way, it doesn't really kind of make one doesn't make the other worse, but it does say that there has been a disruption in the family, and so there would have been an impact anyway, regardless of how big or small. So I'm curious about that, and yes. I do wonder how much of that has also impacted on Rick's I guess way of coping with life later on, because we know that early on in life, like things that happen very early on, the earlier it happens, the more likely it's impactful, because something that happens to a very young child, doesn't need to be a big thing to an adult, but it's going to impact them a lot more than someone who's
yeah. Mel, anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, look, I very much, I guess, tagging on to what Ash said about that whole trauma framework. But I guess I have more questions. You mentioned that, very early on in his childhood, he was observed to be quite highly anxious.
Mm.
And I was just wondering, was this picked up at school, at home? Was any supports or help provided to him? What was their understanding of this
Mm.
intensity of anxiety, that the onset was anxiety, and later on in his 20s, I guess secondary diagnosis was depression. So just wanted to get a bit of understanding around, how he was at school, and I don't know whether that information is available to you, Amy. But yeah, I was
No,
very curious about that. Yeah.
yeah, no, unfortunately it isn't, because yeah, we only have what was sort of testified to.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they don't release the full report because of confidentiality as well. So it's really tricky. It's so annoying because we're trying to like decode a puzzle. Because that really, really good point actually, Mel, that you just mentioned, because that might also tie into how he copes with it now. I kind of think of, Rick. I'm trying to think what year he would have been born in, but it's like what, like 70s. I'm guessing in the 1970s.
Yeah, 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 pretty
Yeah.
much. I feel,
So you kind of wonder, yeah, like was like the mental health services for children back then would have been quite different. So if he was refusing to go
of
to
course.
school or anxious,
Mm.
he probably didn't even have CBT or anything back then. So CBT
Yeah,
for the non-psychs out there is the gold standard treatment for anxiety, particularly childhood anxiety, cognitive behavior therapy. So you wonder, like, did mum, allow him to not go to school, or, was he forced to go to school anyway? I mean, his mum, and, this comes up in terms of when we look at his family, his mum is very supportive. She's also been
mm,
at trial. She calls him, she's supportive. So is his stepdad, so is his sister, and his daughter. Everyone in his family have banded around him. No one's turned their back on him. So it's hard to know, like, does, and we know also that Kathy, his wife, does look after him a lot. She props him up. They're a very close relationship. They've been together for such a long time, sort of almost like high school sweethearts, I think. But yeah, really important question. And I don't know, again, I mean, I'm going to insert my own opinion. I like what Ashley said, the highly sensitive person. Absolutely, we've got this highly sensitive nervous system showing up when you have a child at the age of school age, early school age, already being highly anxious about going to school, worrying about bad things happening, to the extent that it gets mentioned in a report. That shows that it's not just sort of developmentally appropriate kind of average anxiety. It's out of the norm. And then we also get this consistent theme of feeling unliked. And as a neurodivergent person, to me, that was where I started to think, are there some elements there? It's hard to know, of course, we're just speculating, but yeah, it definitely seems to be something that I'd have a question mark over.
And I
Yeah.
guess, just also thinking, if we were to think about this similar presentation in current day and age, I take it that that was the 1970s, but if you take it in this presence, how would schools or families respond to that? Would it
Mm.
just be considered as anxiety, or would there be some other considerations to this kind of a presentation? If you have a boy who is highly anxious, school
Mm.
refuser, has this excessive worry over what would happen to him, and his family, and those, you might start thinking what else is beneath the surface, apart from
Exactly.
what appears as masking as anxiety. Yeah.
Exactly. As a child psychologist, absolutely. Like when I see a child that young and that sort of debilitated by anxiety, yeah, we're looking at screeners for other like neurodevelopmental issues. Obviously, definitely would look at attachment and trauma history and things like that too. I guess, yeah, what we see, and this is just me adding some more of a perspective from knowing a little bit more about some of the dynamics in the case, is again the mother-child relationship here. There's a call which we may hear later when we're looking at confessions where his mum says, "I love you no matter what," like a lot of warmth between them. So to me, attachment to mum seems pretty solid. I mean, that's obviously looking at just a very small snapshot and in adulthood. But yeah, I don't think in the 70s anyone would have looked at neurodivergence the way we do
Mm,
now. Let's be honest. I
for
mean, even when
sure.
we were
Yeah.
kids, no one did. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I know we're all slightly different ages, but I know when I was a kid, you know, I didn't know any kids that had ASD or ADHD because it just wasn't diagnosed and it wasn't seen. And as somebody who was subsequently diagnosed with ADHD in my 30s, nobody ever would have guessed it back then. And I was a highly anxious, child as well.
I think if I can just speak to that, because I work a lot with neurodivergent people, and also being neurodivergent myself, I've got more than one. And what I have noticed is that there are I grew up in, I went to school like in the 90s, and not in my school, but what I was aware of, like the kids that got picked up were the ones who were very externalizing in their behaviors. So when they act out, had like I guess meltdowns, or I don't know, bouncing around and can't sit still, like it's that sort of more overt behaviors that get picked up. But more often than not, in my experience, and also kind of what I see then the trajectory that carries on, what we call, I guess, high masking, when someone is really anxious or worried about doing the wrong thing, they tend to hide those behaviors because they don't want to get into trouble. And then we see sort of like the opposite, where more often than not, these kids then probably won't get picked up because if they're generally well behaved, even if they're struggling on the inside, that is seen as like a well-behaved kid, and so they shouldn't have any problems. Like that sort of very simple way of like kind of how teachers would respond to a class of like 40 kids. So that's kind of like something I'm thinking about. The other thing I was going to mention as the both of you were talking is that there's a possibility also that regardless again of what Rick sort of was going through like internally, but I would think that if he was that highly anxious, the other kids would probably pick up as well. Like this sounds like someone, just even hearing that, someone who's quite like low self-esteem, has quite low self-esteem, and also just very concerned about what people think, like that was mentioned, right? So I would be thinking that kids are a lot of things happen unconsciously, but kids can pick up like which other kids are different.
For sure.
And I wouldn't be surprised if he got bullied, even if it's either overtly or even covertly. And being a boy as well, I think a shy and anxious boy, I think that there's even more layers of that that does kind of impact.
Something else as well. So Rick Allen, as an adult, his height is about 5'4", 5'5", and the reason I mentioned that is, I wonder if he was a small child too, because obviously that's quite a lot below the average height for men. I believe the average height for men in the United States would be about 5'10", maybe. I think 5'9", 5'10" at the lowest. So that's quite significantly shorter. Anyone who's actually been in the courtroom when Rick has been there has said, it's quite obviously smaller in stature. So, I mean, being mindful, he did lose some weight when he was incarcerated too. So he will look smaller in frame. But I wonder again, and we think about kids, and I work with kids who are smaller in frame, and boys particularly, they do get picked on. They absolutely do. Yeah. And then one other point that I wanted to raise, just giving you a bit of background about Rick, is that he had a heart attack at age 37. Now, again, I think that's something that is relevant, because you wonder, with someone with a highly sensitive nervous system, we know that brain body connection, and you kind of wonder, was that a consequence of decades of heightened stress? Now it could be genetic aspects here or whatever, but I'm just sort of, it's something else to kind of pay attention to, I guess.
I can speak to that just a little bit, quick point, but there is the ACE study, which is the Adverse Childhood Experiences study. It's a huge research that was done, like I think almost like population wide. I can't remember exactly. Don't quote me the numbers. And they did an update recently. But what the ACE study actually shows is that the impact of childhood developmental trauma or highly stressful experiences, especially if they're chronic, do have an impact on a person's health, and not just mental health, but also physical health. So it's really quite, that whole, like metabolic syndrome and, more chronic like health disease, autoimmune problems. It's kind of one of those things. It's not saying that it's a definite. It's not like 100%, but we look at it population wide. There is really a significant.
It's interesting. Well, I mean, it's like we most people who are interested in psychology will know the book The Body Keeps Score, Bessel van der Kolk. So we know that trauma is absolutely held in the body. Your nervous system isn't just your brain; it runs throughout your entire body. And I guess the other point I was going to say here is that, and again, we'll see what you guys think when you see interactions between Rick and his mum and his wife. He presents as very caring and very protective of them, just as they're protective of him. So you going back to your point before, Ash, about masking, I was actually just thinking, he probably wouldn't want to stress his mum out. Mum's had a stressful experience. Dad abandoned them, she's remarried and, he loves his mum. He's certainly very close to his mum. Actually, on the day of the murders, the morning before he went on the trails that day, he had been visiting his mum and his dad, his stepdad. I think his sister had been there too. So, yeah, you kind of think about the impact there of is he trying to hide this? Is he trying to contain this? So, and I mean, for the people who are listening now, not hide anything deviant, because I think that's what they'll sort of try and get to, the people who think he's guilty, but more that he might have, been trying to hide some of the difficulties. That might be why we don't have reports that I'm aware of bullying. I mean, we don't know. There could have been anyway, because the testimony is quite limited, as you can see.
But that would explain his school refusal, right? Because
Exactly.
there is always one part, but it could also be driven by bullying. I guess one point I wanted to raise is, and again, like I'm not diagnosing, I only know very limited, but as a hypothesis, right? When you have a child who presents as that anxious and with all those kind of patterns of thinking around, harm to himself or his family and things like that, I guess there's also this consideration of what we know regarding early kind of psychosis, that being ultra high risk. And we know that there are studies out there that kind of links, highly sensitivity to neurodivergence, whether be it ASD or ADHD, to I guess that kind of a presentation. So I'm just putting it out there that maybe that's something to consider as well.
Yeah, for sure.
If we're on the topic of a hypothetical diagnosis again, right? Like this is based on just what we know so far. Then I'll be thinking the differential also is thinking about obsessive compulsive disorder. So psychosis. Yeah, I think Mel is probably more well versed in that than I am. I have some experience with that, and so I wouldn't rule that out. Like I would, if this is an assessment I'm doing, I will still check for that. But I will also be considering obsessive compulsive disorder, which is also quite common in that sort of highly anxious, and possibly neurodivergent kind of and highly sensitive child.
Yeah. And certainly that's something that was on my mind as well, looking at this. Just going to give you just a couple more detailed little bits and pieces that I sort of have, because it's quite hard to get it all from the testimony because it kind of goes all over the place and there's all these legal aspects as well that show up. And also what we get from the witness is dependent on what questions are asked by the lawyers and also what questions are allowed to be asked by the lawyers. And just a little side point on this for Ash and Mel, who obviously didn't follow the trial. The judge in this trial was seemed very heavily influenced by the prosecution and much more a tendency to side with what the prosecution thought was or wasn't admissible. So the defense was somewhat handicapped with a lot of this stuff. But I'm just going to tell you a few more things. So one of the things was he got very sort of stuck on feeling guilty on finances. So he really worried that he wouldn't be able to provide for his family. So he had even purchased like the stock ticker on his phone, and he was looking at the stock market. Now they lived in a pretty nice house in the Delphi area. He had a supervisor management job. His wife worked at a veterinary clinic in administrative kind of duties, and his daughter had gone to university and had graduated. So they were doing pretty well. He was driving. This is 2017 when the crime occurred. He was driving a 2016 car. It's clearly they're not a family that were on the brink of any financial collapse, but yet he would get so worried about it and stuck on it. So this fear of not being able to provide for his family, this fear of not being able to do well enough at work, this fear of what other people thought of him. Those are some of the themes. Another thing that I wanted to raise about him was that he did do some college, and before that he had these sorts of retail roles as well, just to give you a little bit of an idea of, I guess, some of his educational background. Just on that, because I will go to the neuropsychological findings as well in a minute, what would you predict in terms of and I mean, obviously this is a big question, what would you assume in terms of his overall cognitive functioning, like his IQ? Would you guess kind of average, above average, below average?
So I want to say, but like
I know it is.
I would put it in the average ballpark. Like I think that he is not either extreme. Like there's no obvious like highly gifted, but there also isn't an obvious intellectual disability.
Yep.
I would say average, but I'm not sure if there is a low average, high average, like that. I have to have more information.
Yeah, but I guess that's the point I was getting at. Like, so we're not looking at, significant standard deviations below the norm, but we're also, not necessarily looking at, significantly above average. I agree. It's probably in that sort of bulk of the bell curve. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, look, if we look at his functioning based on what you said, Amy, look that he has working in retail, he's always had supervisory or managerial roles. So and he's living a pretty decent life. So you definitely can't doubt his intellectual capability. You don't definitely see any kind of cognitive deficit. I don't hear that in the life he's led thus far. And we know that with the supervisory and managerial roles, you need to have certain kind of problem solving skills and able to manage people and those kind of things. And I think if he was below average, then I think those things he would struggle with. And the fact that he's been on only 3 jobs, that means he's been able to sustain employment. So yeah,
exactly. So what we might do is we're going to pause there in terms of the testimony, and we're going to watch a tiny bit of the interrogation video just so you can get a little bit of a baseline of what he looks like, what he sounds like. Initially in this interrogation, it's not actually an interrogation, it's an interview where he's been brought back in after 5 years after the crime. It's still not solved. He was, as I've mentioned to you both previous to us starting recording, was that he went in and did an interview because he was on the trails that day. He volunteered information, but then was never followed up because they were chasing other leads. And then 5 years later, there's this renewed interest in the investigation, and because obviously this is 2 murdered children essentially, and they haven't solved it in a town of 3,000 people. So also bear that in mind. He works at the only pharmacy in the town, the big CVS pharmacy, in a town of 3,000 people. So a lot of people will have seen him. And this is relevant because, as I mentioned to you guys as well before we started, that there is the Bridge Guy video. Have you guys seen the Bridge Guy video actually? I think I may have shown you at some point.
No,
I haven't.
Okay. Well, look, I mean, that's just something to you guys can have a look at that in your free time maybe. But the video is a grainy image of a man following the girls on the bridge. It could be any, man. It looks like a middle-aged man just because it's got a little bit of a paunch of a stomach, but it's really hard to tell. It's incredibly pixelated. Subsequent to his arrest, people said, well, clearly that he's Bridge Guy, but I guess I bring up this point that it's a small town, 3,000 people. He works at the only pharmacy in town. If it was that obvious, that picture and video was on their screens for 5 years and nobody, felt the need to dob him in. So just something to be mindful of. But let's watch the interrogation or the interview. We'll watch the interview where he's been brought back in. This is early in the interview. He thinks he's just giving more details again about what happened that day. He doesn't feel under suspicion. So we'll watch a tiny clip of that, and then we'll forward to a little bit later in that interview where they start coming down a little bit harder on him. And I'll get you to give a little bit of an opinion on that. So we're going to just watch Rick Allen coming in for this interview where he thinks he's just coming to provide his witness statement again 5 years later, and then we'll forward up to when they start putting a bit more pressure on him. So just a few minutes, guys, because I mean, most people who are watching this video will have watched probably these interrogation tapes in full. And so I don't want to waste the whole time watching, the hour and 28 minutes, but it'll be just giving you guys a bit of a snapshot of his baseline behavior.
Okay, great. So, see you there, Richard.
Just a little joke. So this man here, this is Tony Liggett. He's the sheriff. This is Steve Mullen, who is one of the law enforcement officers. A lot of people would probably want your psychological assessment of these two. These two people have a lot of hate online. I'm not going to say anything directly negative, but yeah, I guess, you know, there's some questionable things that come about as a result of this law enforcement team. Anyway, these guys, you know, they accidentally recorded over the first 2 weeks of witness interviews, and, you know, they accidentally lose a lot of things. But, you know, there comes a time when, you know, there's multiple accidents in a row and you go, well, either they're the most incompetent police department in the entire world, or there's something more fishy going on. But anyway, okay, side point, let's go.
Thank you. I don't know if I gave you one of my cards. There it is. I think you did. I probably set it down. No, it's right there. You're right. So the reason we wanted to talk to you is about the Abbey case. Okay. And appreciate your time in doing that. And as a formality, before we talk to anybody about these things, I want to make sure you understand you're not under arrest or anything like that. Okay. And the door here is open. You can leave at any time you want. I'd be glad to give you a ride back or whatever. So, but we need to make sure that we go cover a formality here. And I'm going to get to the page here where it's this is a Miranda warning. So.
Okay, so you can just see that little bit of a sense of humor there at the beginning, and he's, you know, he looks a bit tense, but, you know, that's the early stage. I'm just going to forward for a little bit. I'm not picking specific sections out. I'm just like going to just randomly pick little points so you just get some baseline.
I lived in Mexico most of my life.
Mexico, like
Indiana.
Indiana, like Miami.
Yeah, you always get that. Yeah, Mexico, Puerto Denver. Yeah.
Okay,
It was Mexico.
Yeah, okay.
But it was Peru was where I was in the National Guard at, sorry.
All right. Go to church anywhere?
No.
Have you ever?
On occasion, nothing.
Okay. Where did you usually go to? Any place around here?
I don't even know. No, not around here.
Okay. All right. Parents go to church, or did you take you to church?
No, my grandparents went to church. My parents didn't.
Oh, I see. Okay. Any criminal history? Have you been arrested for anything? Okay. Any medical problems, heart trouble, high blood pressure, psychological disorders?
Oh, yeah. Everything.
Okay.
I've had a heart attack. I've got a couple stents.
Okay.
And
How long ago was your heart attack?
It's 2010.
Okay, you were 40.
It's actually a pretty opportune time to show you there, because it talked about the health history, but also another thing that he mentioned there was he doesn't go to church, seems quite disinterested, and this will become important when we look at the second half of, I guess, what we're going to look at, which is when he's in custody, he becomes hyper-religious. Okay, just going to go ahead a little bit more to now when he's talking about being on the trails.
Up there, and correct me if I say anything.
The bridge.
Over here, in that building, I'm sorry. So if you're parked there, how did you get on the trail? Where did you walk?
At one point, you either walked down the road, but then at one point they had a trail there. Not a trail, I wouldn't even call it a trail. They had a gravel path that led to the new thing that they were doing. I call it the trailhead. When they started doing all that, there was a trail that would, I think it ran along the road, if I remember right, and then it just cut over to where the trailhead was at. You couldn't really park at, I just remember where that path was at. You'd think you could park there, but it's no parking. So you had to walk. You either parked over here and just, it was actually closer if you went over here and you could just walk to the bridge that way. And then if you went this way, it was a little.
So, guys, this is, I mean, like, this is just still snapshots, but they're quite consistent with how he presents throughout this interview. Anything you're noticing so far?
My sense, I mean, I'm not sure if this is kind of aligned with your question, but I'm just kind of picking up that well, he's probably not one to be very good with his memory, but it kind of feels like he's not he hasn't like pre-planned like what he's saying. Like he's kind of just going like riffing off and just trying to give the information as he's being asked, which is kind of where then it's like he's kind of this, that, it could be this, could be that, which is what happens when when we don't prepare for something. We that could be
like non-defensive memory. I think I read somewhere or something. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you actually the first instincts, and then I'll offer some of my things.
Yeah, look, I think to me he comes across that he genuinely wants to help and give a accurate, I guess, recount of where he was and what he wants to do. So he's not come with any premeditated prep or anything. He is actually trying to recollect to the best of his memory of what's happened. To me, he's coming across as genuine. Yeah, initiative.
Yeah, for sure. Because we're now like 35 minutes in, and if you watch the whole thing, these two here, they just go round and round. Where did you park? Where did you park? Because they're really trying to, if you know a bit more about the case, they're trying to pin him to this particular car parking area and going on a particular road. So they really do just keep hammering the same thing over and over again and bumbling around. So my sense is there's a lot of patience. He doesn't seem put off or annoyed. So genuine, like willing to help, eager to help. And I hear verbosity, which you pot calling the kettle black here. So that's me, right? Like he's giving so much. He actually gives a lot of detail. It's like, so there was a trail here and then there was a gravel here, but not a gravel. And I used to call it that. And like, he just kind of goes off in a zillion tangents. So, I mean, I guess what Ash said was like, it's kind of like he's really trying to think and it's, he hasn't pre-prepared it, but also like, I still feel like it's particularly verbose, but I don't know if that's just me. I mean, because this is also now, 5.5 years after he went on that little walk on that trail that day. And yet, he's actually giving quite a bit of detail because I think he's trying to, like he's and not in a suspicious way. It's because he's super conscientious.
Yeah, it sounds like he's actually trying to, because I think the context is, this is the time where he perhaps believes that he's trying to help them, like he's been called in to give to support in finding evidence, right? So I guess like it shows like he is very trusting of the officers. So even when they ask him like questions at the start, he was just kind of like, what kind of conditions do you have? And he was like everything, and so it's kind of, I mean, like that. Perhaps like the officers did kind of try to put him like let his guard down, and but I do think that this is someone who just kind of is like genuine and just trusting in that sense, like to an extent, like he's like, okay, people of authority, they want my help, like I'll just try my best kind of thing. That's just a
because he hasn't got a lawyer there. And look, I mean, sure, this is still early days, but even when we will look at the second interrogation, which is 2 weeks later, when they've already searched his house, and they've got his car, and they're really hammering him, saying that there's his bullet at the scene and stuff. He still doesn't ask for a lawyer. So he has not had a lawyer throughout this entire process. So I mean, I just see he comes across personable, doesn't he?
He does. And I think his, the verbose part that you see, I actually think that he's thinking out loud.
Yes.
What I mean? That's what I'm picking up with the detail, because it's like, maybe this again, a hypothesis, or maybe just, I think when you try and recollect, people are sometimes visually recollecting what's happened. And that's what he is then narrating to the officers there. A couple of things I picked up, and I know that we are skipping through the video, but just in one place I picked up that they weren't actually letting him complete what he was saying, and they would jump in to ask the next question, or I don't know, I didn't quite catch, but it's like he's not completed what he said, and they've jumped in either with another question or broken
That's
his
because they're trying. So the background of this is that these two now believe that he is the bridge guy. They're already, because they found this lost tip and they think that they've matched his car. And so they're trying basically to get him to tell them the narrative that they already believe. So you're right. I mean, that's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to fix into the story that works for them, basically getting warrant and arresting him. But what something you mentioned as well, Mel, around like, he's searching his visual memory and stuff. He does give a lot of visual details, actually. You notice like the gravel and the trailhead, and then there's a road that goes around. It's descriptive around that. So yeah, that makes sense. So a lot of conscientiousness is what I'm seeing here too. And I don't think I'm going to be able to find it in here because I didn't timestamp. I probably should have looked at this. But there's a few points, and he says this repeatedly a little bit later when it starts to sort of turn a bit. He says, hey, like, I don't want to be anybody's fall guy. Not that I'm downing your integrity or anything. But, I know you really want to solve this case, but, I just don't want it pinned on me. So he starts to like suspect that that's what they're doing. But even then he's polite. He's saying, I don't want to doubt your integrity. I mean, like, to me, that again, a lot of people, and I don't know about you guys, I mean, I'm more like him, so I'd probably do what he does. I'm a people pleaser as well, so I'd be saying that too. But a lot of people would start going, what are you accusing me of? How dare you do that? But he still doesn't really seem to get angry.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that that was kind of perhaps I guess the English word doesn't kind of really give it the weight of what I'm trying to sort of portray, but like sort of that sense that when someone is more trusting and like there's an innocence, right? Yes. Or in a more extreme way, perhaps naivety as well. And not saying that that's a good or bad thing, but it's quite the opposite end of the spectrum of someone who is then coming across as like defensive and trying to protect themselves. Like that there is this kind of like wanting to just kind of be authentic, be themselves, and just hoping that with the truth and honesty that like that people would. Yeah, like that things would go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he does say at some point, like, I don't have anything to worry about because I wasn't that. But, I think that, and that's probably why he doesn't get the lawyer. But I think what we've got to think about here too is that, if he is Bridge Guy, then 5 years have passed since the crime and he's got away with it. And then suddenly he's hauled into the police station and they're asking him all these questions again. I mean, to be this personable and calm, that's kind of unusual. Either you'd expect cool, calm, collected, calculated, I've got an answer for everything, or you'd expect agitated. At least that's my sort of sense.
Yes.
Yeah, and if he's coming across as cool, calm, and collected, if he is guilty of committing those crimes, then there's something quite wrong with the pathological picture. Then, right? You are looking at somebody who's able to, I guess, portray himself such polar opposites.
Yeah. Which again, then later on when we see him decompensate in custody and confess 61 times, it's like either you're cool, calm, and collected and calculated because there's psychopathy there, or you decompensate in jail. Like a psychopathic person doesn't decompensate in jail after they've spent 5.5 years living, knowing that they've killed 2 teenage girls, being calm and collected. So anyway, we'll get to that a little bit later because I guess that's kind of looking more at the forensic aspect. Also, interestingly, Rick's got a daughter himself, and these are girls maybe probably about 4 or 5 years younger than his daughter at the time of the crime. So I kind of just see the dad in him going, because I always say when I first heard about this crime, all I thought was, gosh, I wish I was on the trails and I could have helped those girls. I would have intervened, and I could just imagine if you really were on the trails that day, that's what you'd be thinking, like, God, what if that was my daughter? Like, this is awful, and this is a small town. It's been something that they've heard about, for the past 5.5 years, an unsolved, double homicide, brutal homicide of 2 teenage girls in a small town, so I think, he would definitely be affected by that as a dad too.
Yeah, which kind of speaks to that high empathy, highly sensitive, personality type again, right? And I think also like this is kind of what I tend to observe as a pattern that when people are like highly empathic, if they don't know that that's a difference that they have from the norm, they would tend to believe that everyone else is also like them. So I think that's what I'm noticing, that he's kind of, almost kind of like thinking that the police officers are kind of, also trying to help. And that's kind of why he's responding that way.
Absolutely. And I mean, because I think of myself, like that's what I assume. I think coming into this case, when people were talking about police tampering and conspiracy and things like that, I was like, no, I don't believe that. I don't think that would be what happened. So, we all know that there can be bent police officers and things, but you don't assume that. And look at these two; they look like this sort of unassuming, particularly the older guy. They look like that. Looks like he could be like the church pastor or something. And they even also play on this in the way that they ask questions. If you watch the full video and if you watch the next one with another equally problematic law enforcement officer, they say, we're trying to help you. And, so they definitely play on that too. All right, we're going to skip ahead a little bit further because I don't want to labor it too much, but let's look at now a little bit later on in the interview where he starts to feel like he is being suspected. So we're going to go quite a long way away, probably right down to the last sort of half an hour to 45 minutes where things are getting more heated.
Driven out there in your car, and you think you've driven out there in your car. We have a picture of your car that shows it was going out to the trails that day, okay? And now, one of the important things for us is to help understand exactly where you were at that day, what was going on. You've already told us that you were out there. That's really, really important.
Sure.
Okay?
Yes.
So with that, what I wanted to do is try to help you work through this whole thing. I'm going to be completely honest with you. We've been able to talk to your wife,
Sure.
talk to your daughter already. Well, this is all happening. We had time to do all of that.
Sure.
And we've heard that you had some issues, even had at one point put a gun in your mouth, that you were going to do something to yourself, maybe 3 years or so.
Yes.
And, look, there's a lot here that we need to get clarified, okay? As you well know, we have pictures of an individual who is on the bridge. And to some great degree, you describe that individual as wearing blue jeans, a jacket that's of the same color as that. He described a hat. It's hard to see the shoes, but they're kind of brown. Okay? And this is a picture that was taken with the phone of one of the girls.
Okay, I understand that.
And the question needs to be, is that you?
If it was taken with the girl's phone, that is absolutely, it's not me, but I never have met these girls before, so even if I thought it looked like me, if it was taken with the girl's phone, there's no way it could be. I've never met them. I've never seen them.
All right, so that's
and as far and let's just stop there. As far as my psychological well-being,
okay.
I've been dealing with that for years. It's not something new. It's not something because I went out and killed girls. Now I've got psychological problems. Have I had issues? Did I stick a gun? I know how a gun works, and I wasn't going to shoot myself that night. It was probably a cry for help that night. You've obviously talked to my wife, so it is what it is. But I know that you haven't talked to anybody that knows me, has been around me, my family, not my family, that thinks that I may have been involved in this.
What is believe it? This image, this person right here, he's wearing like a Carhartt jacket, just like you just told us.
Okay.
He's wearing the same clothing that you just told us. We just need to know what happened. Why?
Sure. I said I was wearing blue jeans. Now, I think blue jeans is a pretty common thing that people wear. And I said I was probably wearing a black or a blue coat. It could have been a Carhartt, a zip-up with a hoodie in it. I've had black ones. I've had a blue one, or a blue one and a black one. I guess, you're taking what I told you I was wearing and saying that that's me in it.
So the other kind of...
And you're serious. You literally want me to, that is you want me to say that that's my car?
We looked at it matches everything. That is your car.
Okay, well I'm saying that picture, it's okay,
yeah, no, that there's zero doubt.
Okay.
That's you.
I don't even, okay.
I nearly burst out laughing then. If you see that picture, guys, up close, it is a ridiculous blur of black. And it is ridiculous that they're saying it's 100% his, because it actually, you know, is very hard to identify a blurry tiny car that
Like
they've
it could
blown
be
up.
any car, right?
Anyway, look, that's beside the point. That goes into other evidence, but you can see obviously now he's getting more agitated. But anything you guys are noticing in particular?
I'm noticing him becoming quite anxious because they are pretty much leading him on. Like they're not questioning him, they're asking him to confirm, right? They're not asking, is this you? They're saying, this is you. And I think that's what's making him quite anxious already. You know, he's somebody who has anxiety, and asking him to respond like that is what I'm seeing come across. Yeah.
And at this point, they've spoken to his wife, they've spoken to his daughter, who, you know, is probably, I think, in her early 20s, like behind his back. You know, they're
Mm.
holding him there now. We're now, I don't actually know how far are we now, an hour and 15 minutes. You know, they've left the room, they've come back. You can see they've changed positions, and they're hammering it. They're saying, this is you, this is your car, this is this. And yeah, I mean, it's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, and he's trying to logically tell them, look, you know, the people wear blue jeans. I mean, jeans is generally blue in color. And he's saying, look, my psychological problems have nothing to do with this. So he's trying to interject some logic, but he's getting shut down. So, yeah.
So it's quite painful to watch when you know the
Mm.
case as well as I do. I've watched this quite a lot of times. This video here was part of the reason that I really got stuck into to trying to ascertain whether he was guilty or innocent. Because up until seeing this, you know, the trial had already happened. He'd been found guilty. I'd been a bit on the fence, but I saw this and I just, and I think even people who still believe he's guilty see this and they don't see a lot of guilt in this. Yeah. Okay, so that's interview one. So it ends basically with them saying, we're going to, basically search your house and do all this. And he leaves and says, you're an asshole. And, you know, so he is angry, understandably, at the end of an hour and 30 minutes of being, you know, accused of this. So yeah, that gives you a little bit of a picture though of his baseline. Would you say that's kind of what you would expect from anyone? Do you think that's how you would act, how a partner would act, a friend would act, if you were in that position?
I don't know if I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, but I think, you know, like there's so many variations of how people could react. But what I'll be thinking about is, you know, how much is this person being having a defensive kind of part of them, you know, showing up, and how much of that is them, I guess, being genuine or just having a reaction to what's happening in the moment, right? So, you know, I guess looking at it from that frame, I'm not sensing a lot of defensiveness. And if anything, if the defensiveness is there, it's also more from a place of, no, that's not right. Like, you know, that's not true. Like, it can't be. So it's still from that, you know, it's not like I'm trying to hide something as opposed to like, that doesn't make sense to me. So that's what I'm getting. And the part that I don't want to kind of like jump ahead, because I feel like that there's probably more we can see to kind of get to that point. But this is kind of just taking a little bit of that, I guess, forensic lens. And from what I understand, like if someone has more of that sociopathy, psychopathy type of, I guess, personality or way of like being, then you kind of tend to see either, you know, like either one extreme of like that more cool-headed and, you know, like almost kind of like charming, but in that sort of like cool way, or that then there would be sort of also when they kind of like show emotions, it tends to be a bit that there's a feeling of it being put on, or there's an act.
Yes.
And again, like some people could be really, really good actors, right? But I think that's where, you know, like we also have to kind of go beyond just kind of like what the person is saying or doing, as opposed to, you know, how it makes people feel when they behave that way. So when I'm looking at that, like I'm not getting this sense of someone who's like pretending to be something. It really just sounds like someone who's quite simple and kind of going like, doesn't make sense to me. You know, like that's kind of what
exactly right. Yeah, it's like he's just a bit dumbfounded. There's a part in there, and like I said, I probably should have got the timestamps ahead of time. But there's a part where, you know, they're holding up the picture of the bridge, and they're like, "So did you cross to this side or the side?" And he's like, "I don't even know what you're talking about anymore." Like he's just so confused because they're just hammering all these pictures at him. But okay, so to give you a bit of context now, this is about 2 weeks later. So in the meantime, what's happened after that first interview is they have executed a search warrant on his house that exact afternoon. After that video we just watched, he goes home and they basically search his house from top to bottom. I don't know if this is a rumor, but I think I've told you guys this before because my son got very sad about this. They dug up the garden and they dug up the grave of his cat because who knows? So it's been pretty horrific. He sat in the car watching this happen, and he said to this officer here who's sitting with him that the officer says, oh, we'll get someone to clean it up for you afterwards. And he says, it doesn't matter, it's over. Now, their statement becomes a big deal. People say that that's conscious, that he's guilty. So he says, it's over now. You've searched my house. The way he explains it is he means it's over as in, I care so much about what people think of me. And now all my neighbors and people around me think that, I'm a criminal because you've been searching my house and ransacking it with all these police and you've taken my car away. So, which to me makes sense. Does that sound valid to you guys?
Yeah, like a helpless response.
Yeah. It's like resign. So even he's come into the police station now to apparently get his car back. He's come in with his wife, but he's actually handed his jacket and I think his keys over to his wife because he's already resigned thinking they're going to pin this on me because essentially they've now, searched his place, seized things, seized his car. It's been nearly 2 weeks and he still hasn't got his car back. So he's there on the premise that he's getting his car back, but I think he's also somewhat resigned that there's more going on behind the scenes. So we'll just watch a few minutes at the beginning of this, and then we're going to skip ahead to see when his wife comes in.
Absolutely nothing to do. This is a property record and receipt. So this is going to read kind of funny, but you'll see. So we seal everything. So sealed paper bag containing 1 pair of dirty Thor good boot size 7.5 mins. And then on down. So we took the clothing that you had mentioned that you possibly could have been wearing the day you're on the bridge.
Okay.
And then we also took some knives.
Okay.
We took your car. And then we also took a weapon, a SIG 40, right?
Okay.
Right there. I used to be a Beretta guy. I was in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
Shot the Berettas. And then when I first got on the state police, we had Berettas as well. And then we went to Glocks for a little bit.
Sure.
And then we went to SIGs.
I was trying to think what we even had. I think the Berettas were probably coming out before I got out. Because they used to have the old 45s.
So just here, they're talking about both of them have done some military service. And you notice that even though you can see he's stressed and uncomfortable, he's still engaging in conversation. Sorry, I just went straight to my interpretations. But yeah, did you guys notice that?
Yeah.
I didn't pick up on the stress. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to skip ahead now because it becomes, he gets quite hammered. So this person here, Jerry Holman, is another one of the crew that have been, I guess, very involved in making sure that Rick Allen goes to jail.
I don't even remember. I mean,
2001. I'll check for you. I know a lot of the answers to the question I'm going to ask you, but I'm just trying to give you the opportunity to be honest. That's why I asked the question. So you bought it in 2001 in Peru.
Okay.
And I asked you if you ever loaned anything out. I gave you scenarios. No. So that's your gun. Either you had that gun or somebody had that gun. Because there's no way that round gets on that property where these 2 girls were killed without that gun being there. And you're there, your car's there, witnesses say
There is no way a round from my gun was anywhere near the girls, the bridge. It just didn't happen.
And listen, we're trying to help you. We're trying to help you prove.
No, you're trying to accuse me of murdering 2 of them.
Oh, I don't know what happened there.
No, I think
Calm me down. You asked me a few questions. You asked me what I'm wearing, and I tell you what I think I was probably wearing that day, and then you try to say that I'm saying that's me in that picture, and it's not.
You don't have to say that.
I'm done.
Well, I have a warrant for your
I know you
DNA.
do.
For your DNA first. What do you think I have a warrant for? I have a warrant. What?
I figure you're going to arrest me. You obviously think I've done it. The damage is done. Go ahead and do what you're going to do.
Well,
This doesn't just go away.
I know.
Exactly.
The only person I think can explain all this is you, and you're not explaining it to me.
I don't know what it is you want me to explain.
What were you doing on the bridge? How did your round get there? And why did you kill these 2 girls? Or why were you involved in this? What was your involvement?
I had no
I don't
involvement.
think, listen, Rick, I don't think you're the one that killed them. I don't think you're the one that stuck the knife in them. Are you?
I didn't really.
Are you? I'm
No.
asking you.
Anybody that knows me knows I could never, even if I wanted to do something like that. That's not who I am.
Then what happened?
I can't tell you. How do you expect me to tell you? You want me to make up a story and
No, the truth. Truth is simple. You don't have to make that up. You just go back and tell me the truth.
I've
You can't
told
tell me
you.
that this event has not been weighing on you for years and years and years. You're out there.
I've told you that. I don't know what you want me to do at this point. I did not murder 2 little.
I've been so nice
Oh,
to you.
let's see.
I've been so nice to you.
Oh, yeah, you're being nice. You're trying to get me to confess to something I had nothing to
I'm
do
trying to
with.
get you to tell the truth. I'm not trying to trick you. I've drawn out what we have.
It,
Most of it.
you assume it's the truth, and it's not.
It has to be the truth. The scientists don't lie. The science doesn't lie.
That's awesome.
It's saying that round came from your gun.
I don't understand all that. All I'm telling you is there's a way that a round from my gun, the one that you took from my house, ended up next to a murder scene or.
Okay, so you can see he's obviously getting more agitated. I'm going to skip ahead to his wife, and then we can come back and we'll talk about this.
Yep. So, all right, babe. It's going to be all right. They're trying to tell me that you actually believe that I did it. And I just can't believe that.
Trying to figure out where there's a bullet out there.
I know. You think I'm not? And that's what I told them. I can't explain something I don't understand. I tried to explain to them that there's no way that a bullet from my gun was at a murder scene because it didn't happen. I didn't even have my gun that day I went out. You know me. You know this isn't something I could do. And I know that you know that. You don't have to tell me that, I know. They really think I did this. And they want me to believe that I know you know I didn't do this. I guess that's what I'm saying. I don't know what they're trying to do here, but I'm not going to say something that's not true, and I can't explain something that I don't understand. The only way for me to explain it is that I don't know, because I'm saying it's not possible. There's no way that a bullet from my gun ended up at a murder scene. I didn't murder anybody. I didn't help somebody murder anybody. You know, I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you. I know you know me. I know you know that I didn't do this. Had anything to do with it. Like, talk about scheming or something.
Yeah, I don't. How did a bullet from your gun get out there?
I don't know.
Because they said it came from our gun.
I know that's what they believe me. That's what they're telling me.
But how did it get there?
I don't know.
They said there was one in your box above your dresser, the matchstick.
They showed me that picture too. I can't explain it. And I don't,
I can't either. They keep asking me and I don't know how to answer that.
you
No way
answer
for
it.
me to know.
I understand, me either. And that's what I'm trying to tell them. You want to keep asking me and I just keep telling you I can't explain it. I don't know how to explain something that isn't possible. But I know, this is what I do know. I know that no bullet from my gun was connected with a murder in any way, shape, or form. And there's no way a bullet from my gun would have been near Abby and Libby's murder or anything else, because I never even seen those girls. Period. And I didn't even have my gun that day. So that's what I'm trying to say. I don't know how to make that any clearer. I don't know how to make that any clearer. I don't know how to make somebody understand. I get what he's saying. I don't have a way to explain it.
Sorry, guys, I'm just going to show you a little bit more of this because I think this interaction's useful. So it will go a little bit longer.
Like there's a witness that said it was you out there.
Dear, I don't
And
know
I'm
what.
like, how did they know it was you? So they said they showed her a picture. And I'm like, of course you were out there.
If they seen me out there, they seen me out there, dear. And I
But
told
were
them.
you on the bridge?
I told them I was on the bridge. I went out to the first trestle.
Oh, okay.
That first
I
thing
don't
that.
remember you telling me that. You told me, so I told you weren't on it. But I didn't.
It doesn't, hon, you're not in any trouble. You didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. Huh?
I didn't know you were on it. I'm sorry.
Well, don't worry about it.
You told
Hon,
me you weren't.
huh?
You told me you weren't, so I just was.
No, I told you that I walked.
Okay.
I love you, baby. I don't know what they're trying to do, but I know that that's not what I told you. I love you. And it's just, they're not going to get away with this.
So that interaction about what he did or didn't tell her about the bridge is important. I'm just going to skip just one more bit towards the end, and then we'll come back and talk for a couple minutes.
And whatever the fuck happened out there, we'll never fucking know because you're too big of a fucking.
So
go ahead.
So tell you I did something.
Tell me
that I didn't do.
The truth, Rick. I don't want to know.
I've told you the truth, and you don't want to hear it.
The evidence tells me otherwise. The evidence clearly indicates you're involved in this.
No, it doesn't.
It fucking does.
It doesn't. I'm telling you that there is no way that a bullet from my gun was used in these murders.
And I'm telling you that we had this fucking round on February the 14th, 2017. It's been secured in the fucking laboratory. And we've tested other guns
I understand what you're saying.
I want her to hear this.
I understand what you're saying. What I'm telling you is I can't explain something I don't understand.
Oh, the scientists explained it for you. The lab analysis and analysts have explained that for you. They're saying that this round, without a doubt, came from your gun.
Then you've taken it from somewhere else then. Because it's not possible.
I did not take it from somewhere else. It was logged in. It was taken as photograph. You think we fucking went and stole the fucking round and threw it down by a fucking dead girl's foot? This ain't fucking TV. This is realistic.
I understand.
We collected that fucking item on February the 14th. We didn't take it from anywhere else but that fucking scene. And we didn't take your gun from anywhere else. We took it from your fucking house.
I'm telling you, I can't explain something.
And I'm telling you, the fucking analysts explain it. You can't get past this.
Can you please let my wife out?
Absolutely. Come on, Kathy.
I love you, baby. Can I kiss her?
Yeah, kiss her. Do the right thing, Kathy. Tell him to do the right thing.
She knows I will.
Yeah, do the right thing. You're going to put your family through this for no reason.
Okay, so I'm gonna pop that aside, and we'll finish up in a minute. But yeah, any thoughts on all of those interactions you just saw?
A lot.
Yeah, it's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, lots of thoughts. Okay, I'll try and keep it brief, but a couple of things. Like if I'm just kind of looking more from that, objective diagnostic lens, like from my experience, I often think that if we want to see, if someone is saying that they don't remember something or they don't know something, is that because they actually is telling the truth that they don't, or is there something psychological that could be impacting on them remembering that, right? There is a difference between people remembering things but not remembering details. That's probably a bit more like ADHD or like kind of like different neurotypes. But if someone doesn't remember something happening at all and like really appalled by that, then I would be kind of thinking more about like dissociation. What we understand like is that dissociation is a whole spectrum. Dissociation can happen when people have had like early life trauma, but there's many things that we need to look at in order to actually consider whether that's a dissociative picture or not, because dissociation doesn't just happen like out of the blue, like that's kind of like things that you can kind of trace. And I probably won't get into the diagnostic criteria for now, but in the past, what people call like split personality disorder, now we consider that the term is dissociative identity disorder, and there's a whole range of like dissociative disorders as well. Now I'm not sure if the psychologist that assessed him has looked at dissociation, but I would think that that's a very important thing to actually distinguish. Like, is this someone who maybe did something but didn't remember, or they actually, there's no evidence to say that they could have done something that they don't remember. So I do think that that's something that's really crucial to consider. The other thing I will say, and then I'll let Mel speak, is, I guess for me, I don't claim to be any expert around like psychopathy or sociopathy, but my understanding of it is that this is kind of where you see that almost like the other end of the spectrum around that, having very low or no empathy versus someone with very high empathy, which is kind of like, that there is a kind of like stark difference there. And it's really important to distinguish that, because I think that you might see things on the behavioral level, someone denying that they did something, right? And people can sometimes, I guess, jump to conclusions, because we often think, oh yeah, if someone is like has done something but they are refusing to admit, they would deny. But the thing is that like how they're denying it does make a difference as well. And I think that when there is such an emotionally charged and it really sounds, I mean, even looking at like just all the interactions and how he's kind of like communicating, there's a lot of emotions there. So I will be very, very hard pressed, like for like to actually say that he is kind of like the like kind of low empathy person. So I think that there's kind of some confounding stuff there. And if we think about it, like sort of even from a common man lens, and which is what we think about when we look at like law, right? Like what would the jury say? And it's like, I mean, if you think about it, wouldn't most people who have been accused of something, let's say if we go with the assumption that if I'm innocent, right, and someone's like pushing me and keep saying like, no you did it, and it's like naturally that survival response would go from anxious to then eventually to that point of like what we call like learned helplessness, right? It's like the damn if you do, damn if you don't. Whatever I say is not gonna work. It's like a prey being circled around, and it's like eventually you just collapse and actually kind of just go like, yeah, whatever, this is what it is now. It's better to do that because it's actually more protective, like end the suffering. So that's kind of like the picture I see. But then of course, like from objective lens, I'll be like, okay, like unless this could be something that the only possibility that this could be someone who is having such a presentation but actually was the perpetrator, is that there was like a severe dissociation that they had totally no idea.
What do you think, Mel?
Yeah, look, I completely agree everything what Ash has just said. You do notice a completely different person, right? This time around, when he's being questioned by the police, he's quite agitated, and rightly so. He's been trying to tell them that he was there. However, he can't explain why the bullet was found there, and he feels quite helpless because he's not being heard and being repeatedly accused. You see the wife also come in, and they are scared. They both are scared because it feels like they've been cornered into this. So that's what's coming across. And like Ash said, look, we don't want to jump to the conclusion that he's lying. Potentially look at reasons that what could be some of the other reasons that he doesn't recollect what's going on there. Or and my question was, I guess, did they find the bullet after they did the house search, or did they find it in the initial? Uh,
Yeah, the
you
bullet
know,
thing is complicated. Because it's really hard to trust a lot of the investigation here, given
Mm,
all of these accidents and missteps. So the bullet that was found at the scene is what they call an unspent round. It means it's cycled through the cartridge of the gun, but it hasn't actually been ejected. And so what they've done is they found a bullet at his place. And some people would say supposedly found it because it's hard to know. Are things being
mm,
planted? But
mm,
even if we say that bullet was definitely there and it was his, and they've seized it, they've then said that bullet matches his gun because he has a gun.
mm,
I mean, and everyone, like probably a lot of people in Indiana have a gun. That's not actually anything
mm,
unusual, and it's a pretty common gun. So what they've done is they call it tool mark analysis, and I'm going to just do it really briefly now because it's a lot to talk about. But what they do is, as a gun is fired, there are extractor marks that are kind of put onto the bullet that are
mm,
kind of almost like a fingerprint for the gun.
mm,
And so if you compare, let's say I shoot somebody and then you come to my house and you shoot a bullet out of my gun, those two bullets should show fairly similar marks because the gun has its own little fingerprint. The problem here is that the round that they found at the scene of the crime is an unspent round. So it doesn't have the extractor marks. It has some marks from being cycled in the cartridge, but that's not the full pressure of a gun being fired. So
mm,
essentially,
mm.
it's comparing apples with oranges. So
Yes.
the tool mark analysis has been validated. It's still something that's somewhat still questioned, but there is some reliability in it. But that's for a fired bullet and a gun, not an unspent round and a gun. And so, I mean, there's more to it than that. But yeah, there's a lot of speculation. The person who did this forensic analysis did it alone. There wasn't a second observer. They do it purely based on looking at it under a microscope for visual checks. And she had to fire. She couldn't just cycle a cartridge, an unspent round, and match it. She had to fire it, but she had to fire it 3 times. On the third time, she
Oh,
got something that slightly matched. Right. So
Very
it's
generic,
not
isn't it?
it's not the hard science that he's selling it as.
Yeah.
and also, like, if all his life, he's believed that I just generically putting it out there that people are out to get him. Well, this is his worst fear come
Yeah.
through true, in that interview itself. So I feel like there's so much at play here for him psychologically. um and that's what you get to see. Yeah.
What are
Yeah.
your thoughts, guys, both of you, just quickly, because then we'll round up for now, the interaction between Rick and Kathy when she says, I told them you weren't on the bridge. You didn't tell me you were on the bridge. And he says, I told them I was on the bridge. I was on the first trestle, because that's just literally like a few meters out. He didn't go across the bridge because the bridge is long and it's rickety. And he said he wasn't fit to do that anymore. He had in the past. And then she says, but you said you weren't. You told me you weren't. And then he goes to explain, and then he just says, it doesn't matter. You didn't do anything wrong. I love you, babe. And Pete, what's your, like, did you feel like that interaction was a natural interaction? Did it seem deceptive? Did it seem manipulative? What do you think?
I felt that they'd actually given them time to get her, so that she could talk to him, because she really appeared scared and she was crying. And also, it's like they planted a seed of doubt in her head. I don't know. I don't know if I'm jumping to conclusions, but that's how I read it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they've told her at this point that an eyewitness has seen him on the trails, which is actually completely false. Nobody, I mean, that's actually part of the prosecution's case, that nobody saw him on the trails that day, so he must have gone and abducted the girls and hidden, in the bushes with them. Yeah, so they've told her a pack of lies, essentially, and her life's been turned upside down. This is a man she's been married to for 20 plus years at this point. Yeah. Ash, did you see any indicators of what you would think is manipulation or deception or problematic interactions between the two of them?
Not particularly. I mean, I can see why, perhaps I'm just speculating here that some people might, use that to say that, oh, that was him having let slip something, or like, and then going back on his words. But I don't think that's compelling enough. And
No.
yeah, and again, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm also just going kind of like, if I kind of like zoom out from that, if we're thinking about someone who commits a crime, like what is happening in this case, it's not a murder by, what do you call that? I don't have the terms in my head now, but when things happen by accident, like when people are fighting, and then what was the term for
Like
that?
a crime of passion or like a reactive anger? Do you mean like a reactive
Yeah. Like if that's the case, then okay, we can kind of look from things at that frame, right? Like things could happen, out of impulse. But this sounds like either, something it's very out of the ordinary. That's why I was talking about possible dissociation, or like a more, sociopathy, psychopathy kind of like side of things, where, or even like psychosis, but from that aspect of like not having that sort of sound mind, so to speak, around doing things like that. So I guess then again, it would kind of say that it wouldn't fit then, like this presentation that we're seeing with him. And the other thing that I was picking up, again, this is kind of just more like when we're looking at something, I'm conscious that, like we can more often, everyone has their own biased view, right? But what I'm picking up is that like he was actually trying really hard to reassure his wife. Like he was actually kind of feeling really, I mean, even for me, I mean, being quite a sensitive person myself, like it was quite painful to watch that, and if your partner that you love is there kind of really distressed, it's like, and I'm sure because by that time he's already, like tried to express his innocence. That's assuming he believes that, right? Like if he's trying to do that for many years, was it by that time? It's like, it's a bit kind of like, is there a point to kind of say more? So yeah, just having all those things that I'm kind of like.
One of the things that I've raised before about this point as well around, she thought he wasn't on the bridge. He was on the bridge. They basically try to make out that, he didn't tell her he was on the bridge that day because otherwise she would have thought he was bridge guy. So he was being deceptive to his wife. The thing is, he's not deceptive to the police, though. He's told them he was on the bridge. So why would he not tell his wife, but he's telling the police? And then my sense of this is if, and I guess, you guys can speak to this, if your partner was walking on a trail today and came home and you'd found out that someone was murdered on that trail, or like maybe let's say walking on the trail last week and you found that out, and they went and they spoke to the police because they were on the trail that day, would you grill them like, where exactly did you go on the trail? Did you go on the bridge? Did you see the girls? Like you would probably just like my responses would be like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. What did you see, baby? Yes. And then I'd be like, oh gosh, that's just, but I would not ask them for a blow by blow. Like if it was, I guess it's like people are expecting a partner to grill their partner about this the way you would grill a child if the school called you and told you that they, were smoking behind the toilets that day or something. Then I'd be like, well, where were you? Were you behind the toilets? Who were you with? But you don't do that. If you've been married for 20 years, you don't kind of like suddenly ask that. Like I wouldn't even ask it of you guys. If you told me that, that happened to you, I wouldn't be like, oh, but just tell me the truth, Ash. Did you walk around that way or the other way? Like you just don't do that because you trust the person, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And you would not ask them like those kind of questions because that would imply that you think they were there for some ulterior motive. In fact, you would be encouraging your partner, oh, look, you should go talk to the police just in case you might have seen something or you could be of help.
Which is what she did back in 2017. And yeah, 100%. Like, and the thing is, the fact is that now he was arrested in 2022, he was convicted in 2024, and she's still standing by him. So realistically, if she still believes he's innocent now, she believed he was innocent all those years too. And the only reason in this moment is she's traumatized because she's had all of this thrown at her and been told that they've seen him on the trails, and she hasn't got the full story. They've lied to her. And so, of course, she's asking those questions. But once she then realizes no one saw him on the trails, the gun science is absolute shonky, junk science, then she's able to actually go, oh, because I mean, yes, of course, if a police officer comes to you guys now and says, well, when Amy was at the clinic on Monday night, before she left, she killed her client, and we've got it on CCTV, but they don't show you the CCTV. I mean, of course, you'd be like, well, I trust the police aren't lying to me, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, I mean, hold that thought with all of this stuff, because the interaction between him and his wife is important as well in terms of understanding his relationship history, or his kind of the dynamics, particularly when you'll hear some of the confession calls that he makes to his wife and his mum in the next segment. But
Can I just quickly add a couple of questions that popped in my head as I was listening before we end? Just
Sure,
so
of
that,
course.
look, I think, if you're talking about psychopathy or sociopathy, look, they don't just randomly show up at the 50s, right? And
Right.
Yes.
people would have, like, his friends,
Yes.
mother, wife, work would have all seen some signs of that showing up. I'm not saying in that kind of manner, but you would have seen some kind of odd, unusual behaviors.
And the reality is that the decades and decades of tracking serial killers and sociopathic sadistic murderers, because this is a sadistic crime, there's no DNA. Again, this person's been able to evade law enforcement for 5 years. The car didn't show any indication of blood. Yes, they didn't test it for 5 years, but still, sure, he got home, he's on the couch at 5:30 when Kathy comes home that day, and the crime occurred at about three-ish. So, how did he, it's a first-time crime, he's done this, it's a very bloody crime, and he's gone home, got into his car, he didn't have any protective gear on, and then he's managed to not leave any DNA there, and he's managed to get rid of all the blood from the car and his clothes, and he's laying on the couch 2 hours later. But anyway, I mean, that's about, the practicalities of it. Serial killers, you'd be hard-pressed to find one that didn't start their crimes in their 20s. They don't start at age 44. That's how old he was at the time of this crime. And there are serial killers that are caught at middle age, but it's not because they committed the crime at middle age. They usually have just gone undetected for years. And there are other indicators in their life. So yeah, it's the only people who commit their first, violent crime at the age of maybe 44 is usually a crime of passion. You get home and you found your partner cheating and you kill the man who they're cheating with or whatever. They tend to be those types of crimes. They don't tend to be. And I've actually done a search. I've really tried to look for other cases like him, and you're hard pressed to find it. And so ChatGPT, my best friend, calls Rick a forensic unicorn if he is indeed guilty, because it's that rare. One other thing as well, before we finish up, just speaking to your point about dissociation as well. When I first got interested in this case and really kind of wanting to understand it, I did chat it out with ChatGPT, and that was something that ChatGPT raised as well, of, maybe he saw something or was involved in some way and dissociated. I'm trying to go back in my mind of why I kind of let go of that hypothesis, and I'll think about that maybe between now and next time. But it's definitely something to explore. And maybe, we can pick up with that next time.
Yeah. I'll just, sorry, can I just say something really quickly around
sorry.
that? And
Sorry,
also,
time's up.
yeah.
Only joking.
Writing off now, sorry. I say that and then sometimes I go for 5 minutes, right? But I was kind of saying that in a way where it's like, that is actually a good, I guess, mental health assessment, like to kind of look at dissociation, because I think it highlights a lot of things and it's going to give a lot of clues. So it sounds like you have looked into that. So I'll be curious to kind of think, to hear what was, I guess, what has surfaced from that exploration. The other thing I was going to say is that, so again, now we're looking at So if we flip the hypothesis, right, the other way around, where so initially I was kind of like trying to look at it from a place of, okay, I don't know, maybe this might be someone who did commit a crime. But then what I was trying to say is that the evidence is not the evidence in terms of how it's presenting is not matching up, just like how we describe, psychopathy, sociopathy, and the type of crime. But the other side of the coin, which is something that Mel mentioned, is that I think that this is actually someone who has very high vulnerability to be the scapegoat, if anything.
100%. Yeah.
Because of their presentation, because of how they are, someone who is like, very much that try to do their work honestly, just and to an extent, I don't think he has any intellectual disability, but he is quite simple in the sense of like, he wants to live his life like in that sort of seems like that, right? Like and believes things in kind of like a more simple way as well.
I think trusting, right?
Trusting.
Trusting, and
yes.
doesn't have this expectation of like, he's not thinking about twists and turns and devious ideas.
Yeah, and if anything, even if we want to take from that more mental health side to kind of look at what his vulnerability is, and where I guess risks are, is that, well, this is someone who is actually at risk of being manipulated, at risk of being scapegoated, because that's exactly what happens when someone is highly anxious but very trusting, and often has this like I guess presentation of like wanting to be cared for, but also trying really hard to please other people to maintain relationships. It's really it's really kind of like at the heart of the kind of person in any kind of relationship, if put in manipulative hands, would be gaslighted, would be would self-doubt, would decompensate.
And that sounds like a prediction. And just for the listeners here, Ash does not know the details of this case, because anyone listening will be like, have you skipped ahead? No, because you're 100% on that.